Thanks for joining us today, Compassion Heartwell Online. We are in week number 2 of a series called The Good Work. It's a big picture look at the book of Nehemiah in the Old Testament. I'm excited that you're with us today. Would you do me a favor? Would you click share and invite others to join this conversation? And as always, if you missed week number 1, I want to tell you it was a very important foundational message. I want to encourage you to go back and watch it after this. You can always find our videos on YouTube or Facebook. Just look for Compassion Heartwell. Again, thanks for being with us. I'll be back shortly.
Was born for this. I was born for this.
Hello, Compassion family. We are so excited that you are tuning in with us today. My name is Savannah Willis, and I will be your online host. If this is your first time joining us, we encourage you to look in the comments and find the comment that has the Connect card. We encourage you to fill this out so we can learn a little bit more about who you are. If you're joining us today, we want to say hello. We encourage you to drop a comment and let us know that you're watching. If you have any questions, if you need prayer, or if you just want to talk, let us know or send us a message on Facebook. We also want to remind you that there are 3 ways to give at Compassion. The first is by texting to give, by texting the amount to 706-979-2405. You can also give online at compassionchurch.cc/heartwell, or you can give by mail. As many of you know, we will be returning to in-person services next Sunday, June 21st at 10 a.m. If you want to learn a little bit more about what this looks like, we encourage you to stick around to the end of this video.
Hey, thanks for joining us today. We are in week number 2 of the series called The Good Work. And again, this is just a quick kind of a 4-week overview of the book of Nehemiah. Nehemiah is found in the Old Testament. He was an Old Testament prophet, and God used him powerfully to make a difference in a nation. And so my hope and my prayer in preaching and bringing these messages to you is that you are somehow motivated and encouraged in your faith. We want to stir you to action. It's not just enough to say, yes, I've made a decision for Jesus. Awesome if you did. But that's not where it ends. There's so much more before each of us that we have to do. And so my hope and prayer is over these next few weeks, you are challenged, your faith is encouraged, and you do something, and you make a difference. So let me ask this question, and I want to ask you, you might want to, but some of it you may have to keep confidential. You may just have to be very big picture and not too detailed, but I want to ask you, here's the question. I'd love for you to comment and let me know. What is it that breaks your heart? What is it that really, really bothers you? Is it the injustices that you see that take place in our world? That's one of the things that's breaking my heart right now. What is it that weighs on you? What is it that is just keeping you awake and that you're wrestling with? Maybe it's a need. Maybe it's someone who you know is in need. Maybe it's someone you know who is hurting, or maybe they are in an abusive relationship. I want to ask you, what is it that breaks your heart? Is it someone neglected, someone who doesn't have their needs met, or they just can't seem to break the cycle of abuse or dysfunction? What is it that disturbs you? What upsets you? What is it that makes your blood boil? What is it that really just gets under your skin and you feel like if there was one thing I could do, if there was just one thing I could do, this is it. I want to know what it is. And if you don't know, then I hope and pray over the next 4 weeks or 3 weeks that we're together, that you will hear from God and God will put a burden on your heart, something for you to wrestle with. Because here's the deal. Oftentimes, the burden that you carry is really God working on your heart for him to work toward you embracing a calling. That burden is often a calling. Sometimes we don't even really realize it. We're on the front end of something very special. It may just keep us awake at night. It may be just something that we wrestle with. But really, it's God calling us, and it's God prompting and provoking us. What is it? I know 3 years ago, Patrice and I moved to Hartwell to take really the biggest step of faith in our life. And it was one of the most incredible, it has been one of the most incredible journeys to be on over this course of time. We moved here with so much uncertainty, but we knew that God was calling us to this community. We knew that God was calling us to this place. What is it that you're wrestling with? Because I have a feeling that wrestling, that burden, that weight that you're carrying right now is a part of the call of God for us to work together to do the good work. Some of you are in that place right now. Some of you are in that place where you know, God, this has been on my heart. And maybe you're afraid to put it in the comments. Just message me privately. Let me know, this is in my heart, Pastor Rick. I want to do something about that. I'm not telling you how we're going to do it. All I know is that we're supposed to be together doing it. And so what is it? I want to ask you, what is it? And where do you start? Well, let me give you a couple places you can start. You can start by, first of all, sharing your burden with somebody else. Tell somebody else the burden that you carry. We're going to get into Nehemiah in just a minute. You're going to see how the prophet Nehemiah shared his burden and how God opened up the doorways. But it all started because he opened his mouth. The doors didn't open if his mouth didn't open. So tell somebody. The second thing is you got to pray about it, and then you got to do something about it. So here's the deal. Today I want to give you a little bit of a backdrop. We're in the book of Nehemiah. The year is 586 BC. The walls of Jerusalem have been destroyed by King Nebuchadnezzar. The Babylonians have attacked, and the city is just desolated. It's destroyed. The temple is destroyed. The Babylonians had taken the Jewish people captive. And then decades later, some Jews were released to go back and to rebuild their homeland. When they got there, there's no economic system. There's no leadership structure. Really, there's no hope. But God put somebody along the trajectory of their history who asks a simple question. We talked about it last week. How are things back at the house? How are things back in my homeland? How are my people, and how is my country? He asked that question, and because he asked that question, God opened up a door. He's an ordinary guy. Nehemiah, just a cupbearer. He was basically a butler to the king. But he was brokenhearted for his city. He was brokenhearted for his people. And because he was brokenhearted, he was available. He was the type of person that God uses. He hadn't arrived at the status of pastor, priest, king, warrior, president, or anything else. He was just a simple butler. So he didn't have a whole lot of prestige, and he didn't have a whole lot of position, but what he had was a whole lot of passion. And because he had passion over position, God could use him. The Bible tells us that, and we talked about it last week, he sat down to cry, he kneeled down to pray, and then he stood up and he acted. He reached that point where he just realized somebody has to do something, and it may as well be me. Somebody has to do something. He wasn't going to wait for anybody, just anybody. He wasn't going to wait for somebody else to rise up through the ranks. He was going to seize the moment because he had passion, and he was going to do the work, and he was going to make a difference. So let's talk about it. How do you do the work and make the difference? I want to give you 4 steps that we see from this passage in Nehemiah chapter 2. We're going to get into 2, and I want you to see there are 4 things that we can embrace, 4 steps that we can do. And you and I need to embrace these. Don't just see this as something that's going to make you arrive. This is something you need to put into your life application right now. This needs to be daily walk stuff. So the first thing is this. You see it on the screen. We need to seek God faithfully. Seek God faithfully. I mentioned it last week in passing. 11 or 12 times we see Nehemiah praying to God. So before he ever moves into a position of making a request, before he ever moves into a position of doing the work and making a difference, he moves to a place where he is putting himself below and humbled himself in the presence of the Lord. In chapter 1, we see it. It starts out and it tells us that Nehemiah hears the news about what is happening in his homeland back at the house in the month of Kislev. Well, what is Kislev? Nobody uses that word. Well, it's around the time of November or December. So Nehemiah finds out in about November or December that his family or his homeland is in disgrace. The walls are ruined. The gates have been burned. He hears this news, and you know what he does? He prays. He seeks God faithfully. And then most of chapter 1 actually is a prayer all the way down to verse 11. And then we get into chapter 2 and we find out now that we're in the month of Nisan. Nisan is about 4 months later. So Nehemiah has spent all of this time, these 4 months, seeking the Lord, being broken in his presence, carrying the burden to the Father over and over and over. This prayer burden that was his. He brought it to the Lord. And then 4 months later, God opens the door. Why did he seek God so long? You have to understand, as a cupbearer, as a butler to the king, as someone who would be in the intimate conversations of the kingdom and there by the right hand of the king. One of his roles and one of his goals was to never bring bad news to the king. So for him to carry a burden for 4 months, it had to be something that weighed so heavily on his heart, because when you found out bad news and you were the cupbearer, you just didn't pass it along. You were kind of the sponge for all the bad news. You weren't the guy who wanted to show up and tell the king it's going to be a bad day. So he wrestled with this, and he didn't want to be a burden. He wanted to do everything he could to remove the burdens from the king. Yet God, the King of Kings, had burdened him. And so he didn't want to bring this burden to him. Let's pick it up in chapter 2, verse 1. It says, in the month of Nisan, in the 20th year of King Artaxerxes, when wine was brought before him, I took the wine and I gave it to the king. I had not been sad in the king's presence before, And the king asked me, he says, why does your face look so sad when you are not ill? This can be nothing but sadness of heart. And I was very much afraid, it says at the end of verse 2. But I said to the king, may the king live forever. Why should my face not look sad when the city where my ancestors are buried lies in ruins and its gates have been destroyed by fire? You see this? Don't miss this, because you have to understand that Nehemiah had carried this prayer burden for 4 months. For 4 months, he had fasted, he had prayed, he had mourned, he had been broken. He had been carrying this thing. And although he was close to the king and he was intimate and a confidant of the king, he couldn't share it until the timing was right. And so for 4 long months, Nehemiah prayed. What do we take about that? Part of serving God faithfully is that there are seasons in your life and there are seasons in my life where all we need to do is we just need to bring it to the Lord continually, and we need to wait. You see, those seasons of long prayers make the short prayers effective. You'll see that in just a minute. He went from 4 long months of praying and seeking the Lord. And it says this, the king looked at him and said, why does your face look so sad? In other words, what is going on? What is happening with you? You're not sick, you're not ill. Your heart is sad. Do you understand that for the king to be able to see Nehemiah's heart, there was an intimacy and a closeness and a relationship there that had been established. So he had gone from 4 months to just a few moments. He'd never been sad in his presence. Why do you look sad? Your heart is sad. And then Nehemiah said, may the king live forever. Why should my face not look sad when the city where my ancestors are buried lies in ruins and its gates have been destroyed by fire? And in verse 4 it says this, the king said to me, what is it you want? And then I prayed to the God of heaven, and I answered the king, if it pleases the king, and if your servant has found favor in his sight, let him send me to the city in Judah where my ancestors are buried so that I can rebuild it. So Nehemiah had gone from this place of 4 long months of intercession and crying out to the Lord. I asked you at the beginning, what is it that burdens you? What is it that weighs on your heart? What is it that keeps you awake at night? Have you taken it to the Lord? Have you carried it in your heart in such a way that for 4 months you've sought him, you've cried out to him, and you've positioned your heart in such a place that when the time is right for the door to be open, you know that God understands your heart purely, and he understands every intent of your heart. So Nehemiah moves from this place of 4 long months of powerful prayers to just about 4 quick seconds of potent prayers. The king said to him, what is it you want? And before he answered, the Bible tells us, I prayed to the God of heaven. Do you see that? Nehemiah moved from 4 long months of powerful prayers to probably 4 seconds of, God, I need you now. You see, we need to be a people who are both. We need to be a people who sometimes we are stressing over a need in prayer. We're carrying a burden in our prayer closet. We're carrying a burden in our heart because God has burdened us with it, and we understand this comes from the Lord. And then sometimes we need to be a people who we just strike in prayer. But I want to tell you, Nehemiah didn't get there had he not gone to the long road first. He took 4 months and prayed, so that in half a second he could say, God, I'm calling out to you right now. When it comes to prayer, folks, there's nothing that's too big for God. Nothing is too big for his power. Nothing is too beyond his reach. And nothing is too small for his heart. So what you're carrying right now, while it may seem bigger than you, and it probably is, I want you to know also that he cares about the small things in your heart. The second thing you do after seeking God faithfully, the second thing you do is you begin to define the vision clearly. Define the vision clearly. Here's the reality, folks. Most people, it's not a problem that you don't care. It's just a problem that you're not clear. And so for many times when we're asked, what is the burden in your heart? We don't have a clear answer because we haven't wrestled with it and defined it. We haven't understood what is my lane and what is my role. What can I do about this? I want you to see it in Nehemiah chapter 2, verse 4 and 5. The king says to him, what is it you want? And then I prayed to the God of heaven, and I answered the king. Do not miss that. When God opens the door, I pray to the God of heaven, and then I open my mouth. And he says, if it pleases the king, if your servant has found favor in your sight, let him send me to the city where my ancestors are buried so that I can rebuild it. What is the vision? What is it clearly? It's very simple for Nehemiah. Just send me to the city. Send me to Judah so that I can rebuild the city of my ancestors. He doesn't ramble on. He doesn't talk about how long he's going to be gone or what's going to be needed yet. He just says, this is the vision. This is what God has put in my heart. And in this moment, I'm going to speak it. I'm going to make the vision clear and plain. He didn't minimize the role that he would play. He didn't complain about where he was. He didn't complain and belittle the moment where he was as a butler. He saw himself not as a butler, but as a builder, because he understood that if God be for him, the things that were breaking his heart, if God be for him, then he knew he could build the thing that God had put in his heart. So Nehemiah makes a bold and clear appeal. He says, send me to the city. Maybe it's this. Maybe the thing that breaks your heart is racism. Well, then if racism breaks your heart in your community, then you need to figure out, how can I address it? What can I do to have meaningful conversations, to be a part of meaningful change? I need to seek God first faithfully, but then I need to be able to say it clearly. I need to be able to say it clearly. This is it. Maybe that's too big for you. Maybe you just realize, you know what, I want to get my family out of debt by the end of 2022. Then fine, make the vision clear. Write it down and make it clear and hold yourself accountable to it. Maybe you want to have a personal conversation with all of your coworkers, all of the neighbors that you have on your street. Make it clear. Maybe you want to donate $10,000 to help us start a Hope Center here at Compassion Church. Go for it. But do something. Maybe you want to help teen boys overcome porn, or maybe you want to serve as a small group leader in Kid Men every week because you know that having a Kid Men adult volunteer every week is going to do so much for that child. Here's the deal. If your vision isn't clear, then people can't follow. Nehemiah made his vision clear. He said, send me to the city. Send me to the city. God, this is it. 4 months of prayer had culminated in about one sentence. Send me to the city. The third thing is this. You have to make your plans carefully. If you don't have a plan in place, then what you have is just a wish. And without a plan, you'll never get started. If you're just wishing, you'll never get started. If God has given you something in your heart that's a burden, that's a weight that you're carrying right now, then you have to begin to lay the plans. One of the scary things about being a Pentecostal, and I can say this because I am one, is too many times we Pentecostals, we like to not plan and just rely and say we're being led by the Spirit. And really, what if God could lead you in the Spirit in your planning? Don't cop out on God. Seek him first. Seek him faithfully. Write the vision and make a plan. He can lead you in that planning. Watch the detail of planning that Nehemiah goes into in Nehemiah chapter 2. Verse 6, the king with the queen sitting beside him asked me, how long will your journey take? And how will you get back? Or when will you get back? It pleased the king to send me, so I set a time. And I also said to him, if it pleases the king, may I have letters to the governors of Trans-Euphrates, so that they will provide me safe conduct until I arrive in Judah. And may I have a letter to Asaph, keeper of the royal park, so he will give me the timber to make the beams for the gates of the citadel by the temple, and for the city wall, and for the residence I will occupy. And because the gracious hand of my God was on me, the king granted my request. Now, I love the detail that we find here, and I think it's really important that up until this point, it's just been an interaction between Nehemiah and the king. And for some reason, the Bible puts it in there that Nehemiah was sitting there or was making an appeal to the king, but also beside the king, the queen was there. Do you see God's timing and God's detail in that moment? Because oftentimes you've got to make the appeal to the right person. And so the queen is beside the king. And I have to feel like in that moment, her brokenness and her humanity and her compassion and love as a queen is probably over there elbowing the king, saying, yeah, you need to do this. We don't have it in the Bible, but I'm just curious if maybe that wasn't the case. Regardless, what we do see is that we see Nehemiah making detailed plans for the king, but he did not make the plans until he received the invitation. How long will your journey take? When will you be back? That was the question. And so it pleased the king to send me, so I answered him. That's what it says. Nehemiah says, so it pleased the king, so I set a time. I put myself on the clock. And not only did he put himself on the clock, but he made two more requests. He made a request for protection. When he says, would you do me a favor, king? Would you send a letter? May I have a letter to give to the governors of the Trans-Euphrates so they will provide me safe conduct until I arrive in Judah? And then he also, not only did he ask for protection, but he also asked for provision. He said, would you write a letter to Asaph, the keeper of the royal forest or royal park, so that he will give me the timber that I need to do the construction, to do the building that I need. Listen, here's the deal. Nehemiah didn't have a detailed plan. He just had a plan. He had a plan, and he had a plan of action, and he understood that as he was going down this road, he was going to need protection, he was going to need provision, but God was going to begin to meet those needs as he walked out in faithfulness. He created a plan. He said, this is how I'm going to accomplish it. This is what I'm going to do. Well, maybe you're sitting there today and you're thinking, well, Pastor Rick, I don't know how to plan. Well, can I say something? If you've got a burden and if you've got a passion, will you just start? Because you're better off to start with an imperfect plan and a whole lot of passion than a perfect plan and the passion is gone, or the moment is gone, or the opportunity is gone. Do something. Get the ball moving. Start moving in the right direction. Maybe you're saying, I don't have a plan. Then maybe what you need to do is you just need to do the next right thing. I shared this in a couple of conversations previously. I'm going to share it one more time. I was on a conference call with other pastors a couple of weeks ago. And due to the racial tension, a black pastor had joined us, and he was speaking to us about this. And he made a bold and courageous, audacious appeal to us. He said, do me a favor, pastors, brothers. He said, don't go and miss 15 white people just to go find a black brother to love. He said, love the next man up. Love the next man up. That's what I want to say to you. Do the next right thing. In other words, when you start doing the next right thing, when you start loving the next right person or the next person, then when you get to somebody that doesn't look like you, it's not hard. And when you get to a place where you don't recognize it, well, you've already got the ball moving and you've already started something. Well, maybe you're saying, I don't have a plan. Well, then maybe you need to get an education. Listen to a podcast, read a book, watch a video, learn something. You are responsible for you. Grow. We preached this message series at the beginning of the year called 6 Foot Baby. It's time to grow up. And the onus of that sermon series was that you and I have to take personal responsibility for our faith. If anything that coronavirus has taught us is that you and I are responsible for our faith. We in America needed this wake-up moment. We needed this wake-up call so that we would begin to embrace the responsibility for our faith. So listen to a podcast, read a book, find a mentor, ask a question, sit still and ask a question and just listen. Grow. Here's the deal. Success is not just something that's achieved, some great accomplishment in the future. Success is simply being faithful to do the right thing in the right moment, at the right next moment. Just do the next right thing, and you'll be successful. And the fourth one is this: inspire the people realistically. You have to hang with me. You'll have to come back next week, but we're going to find out that Nehemiah, in this powerful 2 weeks leading up to next week, has been faith-filled, encouraging, and powerful. But I want you to understand that Nehemiah is going to face opposition. He's going to face discouragement. He's going to face the detractors, the people that say this is not the way and you are wrong for doing it this way. I want to tell you that anytime you try to do something for God, you will always encounter the resistance. And it's in the resistance that you are reminded that God is present. You're going to face distraction. You're going to face fatigue. You may run low on finances, or you may run low on energy. You're going to ask yourself, is this even worth it? Is this even possible? Am I the right one to do this? Did I really hear the Lord? You are going to ask yourself those questions. I know that because I've asked myself those questions. So you have to inspire people realistically, and sometimes you have to inspire yourself realistically. Sometimes you have to realize, you know what, this is what God has called me to do, and because I know God has called me to do, I'm not going to let up off the gas at this point. I'm going to keep on pressing because I know God has called me to this. Look with me in chapter 2, verses 17 and 18. Nehemiah said, then I said to them, this is Nehemiah speaking, he said, you see the trouble that we are in. You see the trouble we're in. Jerusalem lies in ruins, and the gates have been burned with fire. Come, let us rebuild the walls of Jerusalem, and we will no longer be in disgrace. Verse 18, I also told them about the gracious hand of my God on me, and what the king had said to me. Here's the deal. Nehemiah just simply told them the truth. He didn't say this was going to be an easy project. In fact, we don't find out later on until just how long it took. I'm not going to tell you. Maybe you know, and hopefully you do. If not, go and read the book. We don't see that it's going to be an easy street, an easy road to go down. What we see is Nehemiah making an appeal to reality, and that reality is this. Look, this place is in trouble. Our city lies in ruins. The gates are burned, and we are nothing but a disgrace in our community, and our name is disgraced. Can you just stop for half a second and realize this is our present reality? Because you'll never start until you face where you'll never do something great until you start where you're at. Till you realize this is the place that I have to begin in. So Nehemiah tells the truth. He tells them realistically, and he uses words like ruined and burned and disgrace. But he doesn't stop there. He moves past reality to a place of faith building. And he begins to inspire their faith when he says, I told them about the gracious hand of my God and what the king had said to me. He inspired the people to have faith because God is for them and God is with them. He told them about the gracious hand of God and how favor had been on his life and how the king had spoken to me and the king had dispatched me with blessing, and not only blessing but resources. God had empowered Nehemiah to do something that mattered. Something that makes a difference. I want to ask you, are you doing anything that makes a difference? Are you doing anything? Because you and I are called to do a good work. And if you can't look around this community and this nation right now and see that we are lying in ruins, see people in disgrace, we see families that are in disgrace, we see families that are ruined, we see families that are destroyed and dysfunctional. Do something that matters. God had empowered Nehemiah to do something that matters, to do something that would make a difference. Let me close by saying this. That thing that weighs heavily on you, that burden, that thing that crawls under your skin, that thing that makes your blood boil, there's a good chance that God put that there. And he put it there because he wants you to do something with it. He wants you to do something and make a difference, to do the work and make a difference. Here's the deal. God knew exactly what he was doing when he made you. Your passions, your frustrations, your emotions, your temperament, who you are. God understands you intricately, better than you understand yourself. You're created in his image, and the thing that weighs heavy on your heart is most likely the thing that weighs heavy on his heart too. The burden that you bear will often reveal the difference that you will make. So I want you to think about it. What is that burden? What is the thing that's heavy in your heart? Because what I know is that God has empowered you to make a difference. Yeah, you got to work. You got to seek him faithfully. You've got to make that vision clear, crystal clear. You've got to make your plans accurate. And then you've got to inspire people with reality, but also with faith. You're called to make a difference. You're called to do the good work. Do not sit on the sidelines any longer. Don't check yourself out. You and I are called. Let's get in the game and let's do this.
Like I said earlier, our first service together again will be on Sunday, June 21st at 10 a.m. For the first 3 weeks, this service will be more for those who are volunteers, staff, or those who call Compassion home. Some big changes that you will notice when we come together again is that we will not be offering KidMin or nursery. You will also find that all of your volunteers will be wearing masks and that hand sanitizer will be placed throughout the building. There are also several other safety precautions being put into place just to make sure that we can keep our Compassion family healthy. Over the course of the next week, we'll be posting more in-depth videos about what coming together again will look like. If you haven't already, we encourage you to join our Compassion Facebook group. We can't wait to come together again. See you soon.
Crushing, in the pressing, you were making wine. In the soil I now surrender. You were breaking ground. So I yield to you and to your careful hand. When I trust you, I don't need to understand. So make me a vessel, make me an offering, make me whatever you want me to be. I came here with nothing, but all you have given me. Jesus, bring new wine out of me. In the crushing, in the pressing, you were making wine. In the soil I now surrender. You were breaking ground. So make me your vessel, make me an offering, make me whatever you want me to be. I came here with nothing, but all you have given me. Jesus, bring new wine out of me. Jesus, bring new wine out of me. Oh, Jesus, bring new wine out of me. 'Cause where there is new wine, there is new power.